Hey guys, we are in day 192 in our Bible reading plan, and we are reading 1 Chronicles 7 through 9 and Proverbs 21, 1 through 16. All right, today we're going to talk about how God's kingdom is restored when his people return to him completely. Still, not the easiest reading, right? Let's fess up. We're going to go through a few genealogies again, and every word of God has a reason for it. And you'll see a couple observations. First of all, we'll go through Issachar, Benjamin, Manasseh, and Ephraim, and then it kind of focuses back in on Benjamin, the genealogy of Saul in chapter 8. And so we're going to see as we move from 9 through 10 that we're going to go away from Saul's genealogy to David, and the rest of the book we're going to focus on the family of David. We talked about that at the beginning, how this book is really focusing on one side on the David lineage and then on the priesthood, because it's kind of pointing towards Jesus. And so just take note of that. And I think a couple of things I have here underlined, a verse that I thought was interesting. Descendants of Ephraim in chapter 7. Ephraim went into his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, verse 23, and he called his name Beriah because disaster had befallen upon his house. And think about it, the people of Israel were in captivity and they're coming back from captivity, so there's massive disaster everywhere, but then there's also his own personal disaster. It sort of reminds me in our life how sometimes you can be living through a world that's fallen apart, but then you have your thing, and it's so hard, and the Lord takes notes of it to the degree that he has it in here listed. And then he talks about his daughter was Shira, and his who built both lower and upper Beth Horon. The daughter built it. It's just kind of cool, the little tidbits that you're going to get. I really like in chapter 9, though, now we're focusing on the returned exiles, right? So we're going to focus in on the families that came back. They returned physically and spiritually. And I think sometimes there's that movement towards God. Physically, you got to get back to the house of God, to the family of God, to the friendships that are godly in your life. Sometimes we drift and we start hanging out with people who don't believe like we do. And that's not to say that we can't have friends who don't believe like we do, but there is a growth that happens in a family of God that the Lord invites us to in the New Testament, and when we come to him. And so there's a return and revival, both physically and spiritually. Of course, the heart has to return completely. But I like in chapter 9 where it says, and Judah was taken, well, I don't like it, but I've learned from it. And Judah was taken into exile in Babylon because of their breach of faith. It wasn't a military movement that got them, this captivity. It wasn't a weakness in their cultural, whatever. It was a breach of faith. They didn't believe God. Where in your life is there a breach of faith right now? Where did you used to believe God's goodness and no longer do? The things that will drift us away from God are breaches of faith. And I think it's a worth question as we make our way through the genealogies. Instead of getting bogged down with that, first of all, as you're going through your own difficulties in life, is it time to move back towards the Lord? And if so, in what areas of your life? Where have you stopped believing God? That might be a good place to start. May God give us a spirit of revival as we seek him today. All right, guys? I'm going to pray for that God would revive us. I love you guys, and pray that God will keep us in his way. All right? Take care.